Go.
Okay, on page 15, under the category of sheriffs, chapter 202 is an act to clarify the qualifications and oversight of sheriffs. It amends a current section of 30A, enacts a new section, actually amends two different sections of 30A. Essentially, the law requires a candidate for sheriff to submit written certification from the academy that the candidate is currently certified as a law enforcement officer and has met the basic law enforcement training standards or was previously certified and agrees to meet the basic standards within the first year of taking office. It also provides that a sheriff continually meet the in-service law enforcement training standards and any other statutory requirements of pre-service, basic, or in-service law enforcement training required for certification or continued certification. And accepted from that is any person who served as a full-time law enforcement officer employed by a municipal police department or a state agency, including the University of Maine system, on or about July 1, 1990, or is serving in the office of sheriff on June 26, 2021, or who served prior to that date. So those persons are grandfathered. Note that in the amendment to the 30A provision, it takes away the notion that a sheriff who is only certified in corrections can even run for sheriff. So it requires that law enforcement certification. Under traffic and motor vehicle code, chapter 326 is self-explanatory. This took effect on June 29th and allows harbor masters and deputy harbor masters to have certain auxiliary lights, and it's explained out there the nature of the lights and where they have to be located and all that sort of thing. On page 16, an act to promote traffic safety in emergency situations. This enables a trained non-sworn member of the law enforcement agency to serve as a public safety traffic flagger to control vehicular traffic at an emergency scene in the same manner as firefighters and members of emergency medical services controlling vehicular traffic. An act to allow the use of an additional light on the roof of vehicles of active members of a municipal or volunteer fire department. We always seem to have new and amended laws on emergency lighting for various officials. And again, that's explained there in terms of the nature of the light and where it has to be located. Chapter 204 is an act to clarify a certificate stating the results of a breath alcohol test. It simply clarifies that a certificate of a chemical analysis of a breath alcohol test with respect to a motor vehicle offense may be used as prima facie evidence only if the certificate is issued by the qualified person who administered the test. A person qualified to operate a self-contained breath alcohol testing apparatus may issue a certificate stating the results of an analysis of a test that the person administered, and that becomes prima facie evidence in terms of admission into court. Prima facie meaning essentially that it can be rebutted by a defense attorney. Chapter 205, back at lights again. This is a flashing green light to protect towing operators by allowing the use of a flashing green light. And again, that's explained out there. Chapter 379, an act to improve the investigation and prosecutions of cases involving vulnerable road users. This new law requires an officer who investigates a reportable accident involving a vulnerable user or an incident resulting in bodily injury or death to a vulnerable user when there is probable cause to believe that a traffic infraction, civil violation, or criminal violation is connected to that accident or incident. It requires the officer to inform the district attorney of the investigation within 5 days and submit a final report as soon as practicable, but no later than 30 days after the accident or incident. And then a vulnerable user is actually defined currently in the motor vehicle code as a person on a public way who is more vulnerable to injury than a person in a motor vehicle, such as a pedestrian or someone riding a horse or a scooter or that type of thing. And the failure to submit that information to the district attorney within the time periods does not affect any authority of the DA to take any action or preclude the DA, a private citizen, from notifying a district attorney about an action or incident. Motor vehicle registration violations effective July 1, 2022. And it sets out a fine schedule depending on the nature of the violation for vehicle registrations, and when it's an infraction, when it's a crime, and the fines associated with that. Under the category of miscellaneous, we're on page 17, an act to update the Silver Alert program to include missing endangered persons. And it takes the existing Silver Alert program within public safety to include missing endangered persons, which is defined as a person who is believed to be in danger because of the person's age, mental or physical health, or intellectual or developmental disability, because of environmental or weather conditions, or because the person is missing in dangerous, unexplained, involuntary, or suspicious circumstances as determined by a local law enforcement agency. And that amends the sections of Title 25 that deal with the Silver Alert program. Moving on, an act to enable electronic reporting of suspected child abuse and neglect for certain mandated reporters. And I will point out that the initial dissemination of this new law update included a mistaken description of this particular law, and a correction was made, and a new law update was disseminated just last night on October 24th. So take note of that. But what you're looking at here is the act as it was passed. It essentially says that medical professionals, hospitals, hospital staff, school personnel, and law enforcement personnel may submit reports of suspected child abuse or neglect electronically. And DHHS is required to provide a portal through which these electronic reports may be submitted that is linked to the Department's Comprehensive Child Welfare Information System. Chapter 198 is an act to dedicate sections of Maine State Highway System to fallen state troopers. It establishes the Fallen State Trooper Dedication Program, which designates 1 mile of the state highway system to a state police officer who died in the performance of that officer's duty. The 1 mile section must be located as close as possible to the patrol area of the fallen officer, and appropriate signs shall be erected in both directions of the roadway. And that enacts a new section of Title 23, which are transportation laws. Chapter 419, an act to support E911 dispatchers and corrections officers diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. It adds corrections officers and dispatchers to the list of employees for whom there is a rebuttable presumption under the laws governing workers' compensation that when the employee is diagnosed by a licensed psychiatrist or psychologist as having post-traumatic stress disorder resulting from work stress that was extraordinary and unusual, the post-traumatic stress disorder is presumed to have arisen out of and in the course of the worker's employment. So it's a prima facie situation where if PTSD has been diagnosed with regard to a corrections officer or a dispatcher, that it is there's a legal presumption that it was that it arose out of or in the course of the worker's employment. And that adds corrections officers and dispatches to current law, which contains law enforcement officers. Right.